The migrant crisis has triggered xenophobia in some European countries. I spoke to Professor Roger Zetter of Oxford University. I asked him why the influx of immigrants seeking a better life has led to so much anger and hate, particularly in countries like Germany.
I think there is a fear that somehow Europe is being overwhelmed and somehow the situation of large-scale migration is out of control in Europe. I think, in fact, it's a misleading impression, but it's one that the media and the small section of the public, I think, believe very strongly to be the case. I think it's also a fact that the political leadership in Europe, apart from Angela Merkel today, I think has been somehow reflecting this minority debate and has not been proactive in challenging the kind of the xenophobia that we're seeing in Europe at the moment.
Angela Merkel visited an asylum shelter in Dresden today. She was heckled and booed. Are you surprised by
that? I'm not that surprised, but I think we have to remember that it is a very, very small, somewhat media-savvy minority in Germany and to a lesser extent in other countries. And I think Angela Merkel has been very brave to challenge the rhetoric that is that kind of xenophobia represents. And I think offering a much more powerful and proactive moral obligation that it is the response of Europeans, I think, to adopt in the face of very, very desperate people. And let's remember the numbers are not that large. Europe is a continent, the European Union, 500 million people. We're dealing with a decimal point of a percent of migrants who are coming to Europe at the present time.
Professor Zetter, is this kind of hatred going to create terrible conditions for these migrants, exploitation, mistreatment? Are you at all concerned about that?
I'm frankly not that concerned, I have to say, because I think the vast majority of people in Europe recognize the desperation of these people, they recognize the needs of these people, they recognize that we have to treat them with dignity, we have to treat people in these desperate circumstances in a civilized way. The vast number of these people are genuine asylum seekers, they're fleeing frightening conditions of violence, they've endured amazing hardship on the journeys they've come here. I think the vast majority of Europeans recognize that, and we shouldn't be sidetracked, if you like, or hijacked by a small minority.
And finally, the migrants, certainly this problem is not easing. They are still coming to countries like Greece, Macedonia, Europe, Turkey. Do you predict that this problem of xenophobia might increase as more refugees come into European countries?
I think the challenge to European leadership is to offer a different kind of narrative to this situation, to not reflect the very small minority views. And the obligation on Europe is to adopt a much more responsibility-sharing attitude. The pressure on just a few countries, Germany and Sweden, for example, take pretty much half the number of asylum seekers who are arriving by these means. There is a lot of pressure on the other 26 member states of Europe to adopt a much more responsible attitude and to take their share of the arrivals the migrants who are arriving on our shores.
Part of my conversation with Professor Roger Zetter of Oxford University.